Well, let me go ahead and introduce our next guest speaker. And his name is Mr. J.R. Haas. Am I pronouncing that?
That's right.
Haas, not Haas.
Not
Haas.
Haas, or not Haas.
Say it one more time. Haas. There we go. J.R. Haas. J.R. Haas is the director of Abolish Abortion Texas. He is a husband, a homeschool father of 4, and serves as a deacon at Grace Family Baptist Church in North Houston. He has a passion for the gospel, evangelism, the church, and communicating the centrality of Christ in every area of life, from the home all the way to the halls of the Texas legislature. This past summer, he served on the Republican Party of Texas Legislative Priorities Committee and successfully advocated for maintaining equal protection as a 2020 legislative priority for the Republicans. He is also currently working to support the mission of Abolish Abortion Texas, to abolish abortion in Texas by mobilizing Christians to influence civil government in obedience to the Great Commission. Please join me in welcoming Mr. J.R. Haas.
Thank you, Joe. All right. Everyone hear me? Excellent. All right. My talk this evening is going to be getting in the fight, promoting the truth about modern-day genocide for the glory of God through the advocating for abolition of abortion in the state of Texas. I think Russell gave you the more of the history. Let's talk more about abolition. This is going to be really more of a mobilization talk, getting engaged, actually acting on it. How do we actually end abortion? And what does it really take? So let's dig into this. Why is abortion still illegal in Texas? Does anybody know? Anybody want to take a guess? Well, because we haven't passed a law that outlaws it. I mean, right? First and foremost. But first of all, because as Russell kind of alluded to, the pro-life establishment strategy has been to comply with Roe for the last 48 years. So they're waiting for an unconstitutional Supreme Court decision to tell us that it made the wrong decision, which doesn't appear to be working very well. Another reason is Republicans have had party control, the trifecta is what we like to call it, since 2003. So, how many of you would consider yourself, well, first of all, how many Christians are in the room? Let's start with that. Amen, because I'm about mobilizing Christians. But secondly, how many would identify as Christian, conservative? Well, we already said Christian, but conservative, Republican, potentially. More Republican leaning. Okay. So, hate to drop this on you, but Republicans have not needed a single Democratic vote in Texas to pass a pro-life bill since 2003. Not a single Democratic vote in Texas to outlaw abortion or pass a pro-life bill, according to their strategy. So something's up, right? Rhinos, well, Republicans in name only is a common term. I think we see that in the church sometimes too. We have, Christians in name only, right? And the scriptures tell us about, knowing a tree by its fruit, right? So we'll talk more about that here in a minute. The last thing I want to add is not only rhinos or Republicans that are saying one thing but not doing another, but the church is complacent. And before we all take offense at that, we have to look at, actions of the church. Where has the church been? I told a brother, I was just coming back from actually the Oklahoma rally, and he asked me why I thought we hadn't done more to abolish abortion. And I said, because the church is complacent. We've bought into the lie that of piety, right? That the church is separate. We've truncated the gospel. We've applied it to our personal lives. We've applied it to, it's like this. It's like Christ, God has spoken to your life and redemption for you, and how He's also spoken how you should love your wife, right? He's also spoken to how you should raise your children. He's also talked to us about how the church should be ran, right? Qualifications for elders, so on and so forth. He's even spoken to how you should, You can go to work and do everything for the glory of God. But for a long time, I'm not the historian here, I'm sure Russell could clue us in on that, but for the longest time, we've almost said the scriptures have nothing to say to the public square. It has nothing to say to the halls of legislation. So we continue to raise up men and women to go into these legislative halls and they check their Bibles at the door, and they've gone in and reasoned with finite reason instead of bringing the full counsel of God, the infinite Word of God, the power of the Word of God to legislate law. And so what do we have? We have iniquitous decrees, all right? And so what I'm saying is the church needs to mobilize. Not that we're seeking redemption or even that this kingdom, it's not about the U.S. It's about us going into the culture, loving our neighbor, right? By not only bringing the gospel, but standing for biblical principles. You know, the left, those who hate the Lord, those who love death, have no problem. They're militant about showing up. And I'm not talking about taking up arms right now. We're willing. We're not seeking that, as Russell just talked about. But what I am talking about, they're militant about gathering, networking, mobilizing, turning out the vote, seeking to influence legislature to bring it towards their worldview, towards antinomianism, towards lawlessness. And so we need to wake up and we need to love our neighbor. Ultimately, that's what this talk's going to be about. So let's get into it. How to influence politicians. First of all, politicians need money to run for office, right? How do they get the money? Well, they got special interests. They got organizations that stand for different causes, that endorse them. They have other financial backing that come from different people. And that money allows them to campaign and win votes, right? There's one thing though. Votes actually trump money, okay? So, in the end, we're in a democratic republic. The currency that politicians deal in are votes. But if we don't show up as the grassroots, the money ends up influencing more than the actual people. And so what I'm going to be talking about is how do we mobilize the grassroots, the church, our neighbors, our fellow workers, to get out, to stand up for, not only for the glory of God, but for the love of our neighbor, for defending the 55,000 pre-war children in the state of Texas. So there's two ways to win votes, as I mentioned. Money can buy influence, or you work to build out from the grassroots level. Why the Republican Party? So first of all, before I dig into this is not a full endorsement of swearing allegiance to the Republican Party. That's not it at all. In fact, there are three options when it comes to politics. In this country, you get involved with the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, or the third party. And right now, the third party has very, very little influence. Like legislatively, you got to turn out. The work is almost unbearable to be able to even get a candidate on a ballot. Okay, so that's the context, and then I've for a very long time didn't engage in the Republican Party because of my convictions. But with that, about I think 2006 was when I started engaging with Abolishing, Texas. I started digging in deeper to the Republican Party, and I began to read what an actual Republican was. I had a major issue with a lot of Republican legislators, and I knew there was a lot of things I challenged with the way they were, the policies they were running and the way they carried themselves. But the question for me was, what does it mean to actually be a politician or be a Republican? For a Christian, we can challenge certain Christians in the fruit in their walk, but that doesn't necessarily mean that is what it is to be a Christian, right? How do we know what a Christian is? Well, we go to the source, and the source is the Scripture, right? Well, in the Republican Party of Texas and the Democratic Party as well, what it means to be a Republican or Democrat is in their platforms, their priorities, and their legislative priorities. So, the Republican Party of Texas is the largest political organization that espouses biblical beliefs. The party is separate from the elected officials, as I alluded to. You can hold Republicans accountable to the RPT, short for Republican Party values. So what I'm saying is if the Republicans claim biblical values, if they claim to be about life, if they claim to serve God, to love God, to believe that we're made in the image of God, then that's a backstop. Like that's something we tangible that we can hold Republicans accountable to, right? Democrats, on the other hand, and this isn't wholesale, I just think there's a further distance to go, right? As you're affiliating with a party, you'll see here in a moment why I think it's a little more challenging to engage with Democrats. But believe me, if you feel called to engage the Democratic Party for abolition, I will support you in that effort. It's going to be a little bit more challenging. They'll probably kick you out of their convention. Because they literally, yeah. Anyway, I'm not saying it's a terrible thing to do, but it would definitely be challenging. So, Democrats, they believe in from government, they believe in freedom from government interference in our private lives and personal decisions where they do not harm another. Does anybody think that might be inconsistent in the fact that they highly endorse and promote the termination of 55,000 preborn children every year in the state of Texas? I mean, that's so they would not define that as harming another, but it would be an inconsistency. Another value. So right now we're just reading from their platform. I have the URL here at the bottom. So some of their values, under choice in family planning, they want to fund qualified health care providers, including Planned Parenthood, who provide preventative health care, pregnancy prevention, affordable prenatal care, and postpartum contraception. They want to use evidence-based medicine and data to guide reproductive health care policies, recognize the rights of the pregnant person are paramount, and opposed to target regulation of abortion providers legislation, which creates dangerous restrictions on Texans' access to abortion care. They want to expand access to contraception and protect the constitutional right to an abortion, including the repealing of the Hyde Amendment, which disproportionately impacts people of color and marginalized communities. What else? They want to ensure individual rights to obtain all forms of contraception, including long-acting reversible contraception, abortion care, and other reproductive services through their health insurance provider without additional premiums. They want to offer comprehensive age-appropriate sex education, including information about communication, strategies, consent, healthy relationships, as well as support the right of adolescents to access and consent to their own contraception. So, to summarize, they want to take parental rights away and educate your children on how they view this particular issue. So I'm not going to dig too much further into that, but you can see kind of the direction we're going here with the values of one party. Now to analyze the Republican Party, and again, not a wholesale endorsement, just to give you an idea, if I'm going to strategically look for a political organization to influence and call people to biblical values, there's some reasons why I might look to the Republican Party. Here's a couple: the principles, the platform, the priorities. So in the principles, first of all, they start off with affirming our belief in God. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, I'm not saying all Republicans really believe that. You're going to see this over and over, that just because they say they believe it doesn't mean that's what they do. But at least I can show up in Austin and I can say, hey, you say you believe that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator. This policy does not align with that. Where are you at? And then when they can persist to do immoral things or legislate iniquitous decrees, then I can at least hold them accountable and go back to Republican voters and say, you say one thing, but you do another. Your actions do not align with your words. Next, under the principles, they have a principle that is for the safety of innocent human life, created in the image of God, which should be equally protected from fertilization and natural death. The abolition of abortion is one of the planks. So since life begins at conception, we urge the Texas legislature to abolish abortion through enacting legislation that would immediately secure the rights to life and would ignore or refuse to enforce any and all federal statutes, regulations, orders, or court rulings that would deny these rights. Fundamental right to life as another plank. All innocent human life must be respected and safeguarded from fertilization to natural death. Therefore, the unborn, the aged, and physically or mentally challenged have a fundamental individual right to life which cannot be infringed. So, as a Christian, so far, like, I'm like, amen. Like, that's all good stuff. Like, I'm all for protecting and preserving the right to life. You know, children being made in the image of God. So these are good principles. Next. So this, in particular, as Darrell mentioned, I served on the Legislative Priorities Committee this past summer. Every 2 years, the Republicans have a state convention, and they basically, both parties do this. I guess this would be more like Rome, but like, their platform is not sealed. It can be changed every 2 years. What it means to be a Republican in Texas is actually it's different. A Republican in Texas is different than being a Republican in Louisiana or New York or virtually anywhere in the U.S. Each party affiliation gets to define what matters to them. Even a Republican National Convention has its own platform that may not align with the Republican Party of Texas. But every 2 years, voters in Texas get to show up and actually lobby and fight for what it means to be a Republican. And so I engaged about 4 years ago where I showed up and actually, for the first time, much like Jacob, I think this was your first year to testify. So I showed up with some of our other directors, Bradley, Pearson, Wes Thomas, and advocated for the abolish abortion legislative priority. What a legislative priority is basically saying, hey, we have 400 planks of what are the values of Republicans, and that's what goes in the platform, right? Legislative priorities is saying, what are the top, in this case, what are the top 8 things that we're calling on our legislature to do in this legislative session? And among those, as you can see, is the abolition of abortion. And so, when I went and sat on the Legislative Priorities Committee this last summer, I was able to not only, show up and testify this time, but I was able to actually ask abolitionists questions. Like, oh, what do you mean about this? And what do you say about that? And a lot of that allowed more opportunity for us to open the argument up, to better define the argument. 2 years prior to this, there was much more division among this committee, and there was this tendency to water down the abolition language and to take out the idea for complete abolition. And so, anyway, it's where I'm getting at here is we have actually worked over the last 3 years. We've had an abolition of abortion priority in the Texas Republican Party of Texas. But has anybody seen it? Does anybody know if you can still get an abortion in Texas? Yes. Why? Because Republicans still haven't passed any laws to outlaw abortion or to keep abortion from happening. So we continue to bring this and tell. So basically what this does is it allows us to go to our legislators now and say that 6,000 delegates of the Republican Party of Texas believe it's one of the top 8 things that we want you to get done this year. And every session that they don't, that allows us to go back to voters in our district and say, these guys, and these girls, or lady, whatever, are not doing what we're asking them to do. If we didn't fight for this, there would be no light to actually show that they aren't doing what we're asking them to do, right? So it's very important, and I want to speak to this language real quick. It's very important. I know we didn't have a chance for Russell to talk on that components of an abolition bill, but the 2 main ones that I would say that you want in a bill to be considered a bill of abolition is that it offers equal protection from conception, right? And then the second is that it has that it does not continue to comply with the Roe v. Wade decision because it was an unconstitutional decision. So just to read it, a current priority that we were successfully able to defend and add equal protection to, it reads as follows. Abolition of abortion by ensuring the right to life and equal protection of the laws to all preborn children from the moment of fertilization. So this isn't actually the bill. We'll get into the bill in a minute. But what this did do, we did get that term equal protection. So now, Republicans in the state of Texas, the chairman of the Republican Party of Texas, he now has to go and advocate for abolition. And I can tell you, that's not his position. When he ran as for being a chairman, he didn't run as an abolitionist. He ran and said, I believe in abolishing abortion except for in the case of rape and incest. And so the point is that he now has to advocate for this because the delegates of the Republican Party voted it in as a legislative priority. Okay, so that's the Republican Party. Let me tell you, this was very interesting to me as I began to engage in the Republican Party. And I think we can look to how Moses and Israel, how they broke up and organized how law was to be treated, and how to deal with, cases that came before Moses. They would break it down into smaller segments. And I want to show you, even from a party standpoint, that same kind of structure is inherent there. As abolitionists, we say, hey, yeah, we want to outlaw abortion, but how do we actually organize across the state of Texas to talk to people, to, get people to assemble together, to rally, to go into Austin and actually lobby our legislators? So first of all, just the political structure, you got a voter, you got a precinct. This is my precinct, it's kind of small, sorry. That's essentially my neighborhood. And I'm sorry, it's not my neighborhood, let me get back to that. My neighborhood's kind of a section of that, but it's roughly about 5 or 6 neighborhoods. And I ended up running as the precinct chairman for my precinct, which means I'm kind of the cheerleader for that area, and I represent the Republicans that live in that grayed out or that yellow area. The next level from there is a senatorial district. You can kind of see barely. My precinct this is Harris County, by the way. I'm from Houston. And you can see the various colors. Those are each what are called senatorial districts. And then the little red one is where my precinct is within the senatorial district. There's about 1,000 precincts within Harris County. There's only precinct chairmen in about 40% of those precincts. There's a huge opportunity for Christians to just step in and run the Republican Party of Texas, right? If they mobilized and got out and then began to not only influence the party, but then block walk, talk to their neighbors, got them, not only out of the pulpit, out of their homes, and got them together, signed up on petitions, on email lists in order to influence our legislators, which we'll get into more here in a minute. County chairman, obviously, the overall county, there's also a chairman. They break it up by that. And as far as I'm really focused on at the state level with Abolishing Texas, then you have the full state. And right now, our party chairman is Lieutenant Alan West. And anyway, he basically has to represent the whole party. But you can see there's very much a structure to the democratic process of representative government all the way up to the state level. And this goes up one more level to the federal level, right? Strategic tool. Sunlight is the best medicine or disinfectant. Okay? What I mean by that is the best way to I mentioned earlier that I don't necessarily agree with the legislators, right? But the problem is voters have no clue what the legislators are doing. When they run for office, they say, I'm about this. I'm a Christian. I'm pro-life. I'm doing this, that, and the other. But nobody knows how they actually voted, which laws they actually supported. Because we're all busy, right? And I like to put it this way. Each of us with a job, most of us have performance reviews, right? Where goal setting, and then each year we have to turn around and our supervisor's probably going to be like, hey, did you meet your goals? This is no different, right? We are sending legislators into Austin, and they should be representing the voters of each of their precincts, senatorial district, congressional districts. But the problem is that nobody's doing a performance review. People are not showing up and paying attention, and so we have some poor performers, right, that are representing us, but no one's there to hold them accountable. And what I'm saying is, as a party, we're mobilizing and holding to some principles that we can then run candidates against, and when they don't do those things, we can get them unelected and put other people in there that will do those things. Does that make sense? So how do we do that? First of all, when you go talk to your legislator, that has a little bit of influence. When 10 of you go talk to the same legislator, that has more, right? When you call them, that has a little bit of influence. When you write them, a little more. When you visit them in person, that has more. When 1,000 people go to visit a legislator for one cause, that has a lot more than just you, right? Ultimately, like I said, legislators talk in votes. That's the currency they deal in, right? If they might give you lip service and say, yes, I'm pro-life, but at the end of the day, they're really looking at what does my whole precinct want? What's going to keep me in office, right? And if you're not showing up with enough influence, with enough voters to gain their influence or gain their attention, they're only going to listen to you, so much. They may or may not actually act on what you're asking for. So, building your list, your number, that's what we do as an organization. We are growing your list. When we ask for people to sign a petition, we're putting you in a database so we can influence, so we can advocate based on your voices. I'll share this real briefly. We did a campaign in 2019 for Jeremiah Thomas, who was dying of cancer, who had the opportunity and for a dying wish he had wished that he could talk to the governor, and he got a chance to talk to Governor Abbott. And while talking to Governor Abbott, he said, Governor, I would like to end abortion in the state of Texas. And the governor actually talked about how we had just made a legislative priority at the Republican Party convention to outlaw abortion or abolish abortion in the state of Texas. And he said, we are going to be working to do that this next legislative session. Guess what? The state address came around, not a mention of abortion at all. Forget pro-life even. He had nothing to say about abortion. And again, he has power in the governorship, in the Senate, and in the House. Republicans aren't doing anything. But Republican voters don't know that, right? So, we build our list. I'm sorry, the point I was going with Jeremiah, due to that campaign and sharing that video with people, we were able to build our list as an organization from 2,500 to 3,000 members, all the way up to about 100,000 now, right? That was just through social media ads and just trying to get that story out there. And people seeing that and getting aware, signing up. Now we have the ability to continue to email, educate, and also, one of the things we did to summarize that or to finalize that is we printed out all of those petitions that people signed after watching the video, and we delivered them to the governor's office. At the time, it was closer to about 80,000 petitions, but we delivered, you'll see pictures over here on our table, where we delivered all these boxes to the governor. And yet, in that legislative session, we did have a bill to abolish abortion, HB 896, where it took one chairman, one Republican Christian, I want to say he's even deacon in this church, but don't hold me to that, took one Republican to kill a bill that had the potential to protect 110,000 preborn children since 2019, So that's where it's at. We need to. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Most voters don't know this is what's going on, or they're too busy, and others may not care. But we need to continue to go, not only declare the truth about life and about the slaughtering of innocent children, but we also need to shine a light on the men and women who have the power to do something about it and show people that they're not doing anything, right? Once we list bill, we're also getting a bill, right? We want to go write a bill, because the bill actually forces the conversation. If we don't show up this session with an abolitionist bill, and it's just the pro-life ones, then everybody's going to look good. They're just going to, like, hey, I voted for the bill, it didn't pass, oh well, and then they just keep moving on. But if we bring a bill of abolition and all of them say they want to outlaw abortion, but no one co-authors that bill, guess what we get to do now? I have a database with zip codes that we can email and inform voters now that these people, say one thing, but they do something totally different. When it counts, they don't show up and support these bills. The next thing we want to do is get a vote, and then we want to let voters know how representatives vote. And if you're not familiar with the system, just put it this way, the system in the halls of the legislature is set to kill bills and not allow them to get to the floor. Most of the time, they go to committee. Once they're in committee, it goes to calendars committee. From calendars committee, it goes to the floor and has 3 votes. I'm going to cover that in a minute. But they don't want the vote to come, because if they get a vote on the floor, that's a public record, and we can actually go and look at that. They'd rather have, like I said, in 2019, they'd rather the chairman fall on his sword and take the heat for the other 5 Republicans and just kill the bill and not bring the vote at all. But we have to show up and call on them. That chairman, if we were in his district and we had 2,000 voters and we were putting heat on him and said, look, if you don't bring this bill to a vote, you're going to have a problem come next election. But because we don't have enough numbers to apply that kind of pressure, he's not really interested in what we have to say. So, rinse and repeat. So that's what we want to do. How a bill becomes a law, I'm just going to kind of fly through this. Write legislation, write the language, it goes to legislative council, they kind of review it in the context of the current law. The state rep or senator files the bill in one of the houses. Speaker of the House assigns the bill to the committee. Committee chairman grants it a hearing. Committee chairman then grants a vote on the bill, which is where HB 96 died last time. If passed, the bill goes to calendars committee and then it's brought to the floor. Once on the floor, there's 3 readings. Potentially there's amendments. If passed, it goes to the other body, rinse and repeat over there. If it passes on the other body, then it goes to the governor's desk, and he still has veto power to kill the bill if he doesn't like it. Just a quick civics lesson. Current pro-life legislation. So let me tell you where we're at. I know I'm getting kind of short on time, but Joe gave me a lot to cover. So bear with me. Current pro-life bills. So a popular one, heartbeat bill. It's been passed in 10 states. I'm going to dig into some of the challenges with each. I'm just going to kind of point them out real quick. Ban abortion bill. This is currently in the Senate. It's also known as a trigger bill. There's also what's called PRENDA, or the Pre-Non-Discriminatory Act, which is actually discriminatory, but we'll talk about that in a second. And then there's also what's called the Texas Abolitionist Strategy that doesn't actually abolish abortion. Yeah, let's see here. So, tracking legislation, real quick. What I'm about to talk to you about, you can find, all of you have access to. Part of the problem is you don't know you have access to this. But if you go to capital.texas.gov, you're going to see that you have access to not only who all your legislators are, you can follow bill numbers by category, you can look up abortion, and you can see all the bills that are currently going through the legislature, who the co-authors are. When they're having hearings, you can go and watch the hearings live. Every committee is streamed from this website. All right, so digging into heartbeat bill, currently you have SB 9 and you have what's called a companion bill in the House, which just means it expedites it. As I mentioned before, your bill has to go through one house and then has to go through the other once it's passed. Well, if you have the same bill in both the House and the Senate, and they're both traveling through together, it just allows you to expedite the process, because if it passes the House and the Senate at the same time, then they just have a joint hearing and they send it over to the governor's desk right away. So it just kind of makes it faster, so you can tell the legislature likes this bill because they have a companion bill in both houses. We actually have Bradley Pierce, who's executive director and the lawyer of our team. He has done a bill analysis that goes into more detail. It's over on our table. I would encourage you to check it out. These are just the bullet points from it. First of all, the heartbeat bill is ineffective. It continues this myth of 48 years of false hope, waiting on Roe to be overturned. It dehumanizes persons without a detectable heartbeat, right? It's basically, if the scriptures tell us that the law is the tutor, and we're going to go and only protect children with heartbeats, what is the law teaching us? It's teaching us that life begins at a heartbeat. Well, for Republicans, no one should sign on to that, because we just showed y'all that we believe that life is valuable and that we're all endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. And, you know, it's like, is this just lip service? Or do they actually believe these things? So why do we even consider a heartbeat when they say they believe that life begins at conception? You know, defies reason. It also denies equal protection. So it brings like civil penalties, which is, you know, just it's a lesser crime. Equal protection, for those that aren't familiar, basically says if a mother murders her 1-year-old, what should be the penalty for that? Right? If she murders her 6-year-old child, what should be the penalty for that? Okay. If she murders her child in the 3rd trimester, in the womb, the same penalty for the 1-year-old should be applied to the child in the womb as well. Especially because, I mean, this is probably bad reason, but that child can even be delivered. That child can live in the 3rd trimester and be delivered, right? But the point is, like, even more so, this is like almost a fully formed person. And yet, we still don't offer the same protection for that person, right? And what I'm contending is that if we believe that life begins at conception, that is a person with all the unique DNA, all the data that it needs to fully form and mature into a person, we should offer that protection from conception. And so this bill does not do that. It denies not only the humanity of children without a heart, but it also doesn't even bring a stiff enough penalty for those that do have a heartbeat. The physician has to admit that they terminated the child and they heard a heartbeat. I mean, all the physician has to do is say, yeah, we didn't, I just didn't hear a heartbeat. I mean, maybe they had a heart at the time, but I didn't hear it. Sarah Cleveland, fellow abolitionist, she's a nurse, and she shows in a movie, I think it was in Things Are Murdered Here, that it's very easy as a technician to not get the heartbeat if you don't want to. So this bill is hard to enforce. Right? Because people that are set on, providing abortions, they're the ones that it's almost like the assassin has to incriminate themselves. It doesn't make any sense. All right, next one, ban abortion bill, or what's called a trigger bill. Basically, all this does is say we're not going to outlaw abortion until the Supreme Court overturns its ruling, or, we pass legislation at the federal level to, outlaw abortion. So it really does nothing. It does worse than nothing. Did you know that today it is illegal to have an abortion in Texas? How many people knew that? Raise your hand.
Say that one more time.
It's illegal today. The law of the land in Texas is it's illegal to have an abortion in Texas. It is. Okay? If Roe v. Wade was unconstitutional, and that decision was made outside of its jurisdiction, outside of its contractual jurisdiction, which we all say we believe in, and it's unconstitutional, then it's not the law of the land. If it's not the law of the land, then it shouldn't be enforced. So you have an entire state that's bought into the fact that they believe Roe is the law of the land, right? So they don't enforce Texas law. So what I'm getting at is Texas law actually has criminal penalties. Now, it's not abolitionist penalties, but the penalties that are there for some protections, the protections that this brings are actually less. It moves them back to civil and lightens the actual penalties that will be provided. And there's more detail about that again on the bill analysis. So again, it legitimizes Roe. It's unnecessary and lowers the existing penalties. It denies equal protection as well. And again, we call it a trigger bill because it's waiting for the Supreme Court to basically say it made a mistake. Is anybody still waiting on the Dred Scott decision to be overturned? 3/5 of a person, I remember that, it was like first hesitations, like each person is worth 3/5. Yeah, that's not in the Bible. And the Supreme Court was wrong there as well, and never had to admit it was wrong. And if you're not paying attention, Supreme Court it almost, a guiding principle is legal precedence. So like, if this precedence is set, when they admit that they're wrong, it just kind of, it's like a house of cards. So like, the idea that the Supreme Court would admit that it's wrong, there's a video I would encourage you to look at on our YouTube channel. It's called 47 Years of False Hope, by our executive director, Bradley Pierce, and it literally goes through just the futility of waiting for the Republicans to put in enough Republican-appointed justices to actually outlaw abortion. Not only do we not think it's not their job, that we should just nullify it as a state, I mean, yeah, we'd love it if they did it, but the fact is, we're no closer today than we were the day that Roe was decided. And when you see that, it's going to make the pro-life movement, this idea of waiting on Roe and legitimizing Roe, it's going to make it more insidious. You're going to be like, we're kidding ourselves. Brenda. Yeah, I really like this one. Because this one talks about the Prenatal Non-Discriminatory Act. But it's actually a bill that talks about not discriminating, that actually discriminates. It's pretty funny, right? Because look, you can't kill somebody, so it doesn't offer equal protection. You can't kill somebody because of their race, like the preborn child. You can't kill them because of their race, their sex, or because they have like a fetal abnormality, right? That they have Down syndrome, right? But you can kill them for any other reason. You can kill them because it's Wednesday. You can kill them for no reason at all. In fact, so it only seeks to protect some babies, but it's unenforceable, and here's why. So to meet this, whatever the exemption is, say it is you can't terminate the life of your child because of the race, sex, or fetal abnormality. If I'm Planned Parenthood, all I'm going to do is on the admission form, I'm going to put a statement that says, I am not aborting my child for X, Y, Z reason. Check box here, sign your name, and move on. How are you going to prosecute that in the court of law? You're going to prosecute the intent of the mother? How do you prove that? She could just say, I aborted my child because I wanted to pursue my career. I aborted my child because I was in a crisis pregnancy. I aborted my child because I didn't want to harm my body or lose my good looks. I mean, literally, this doesn't do anything. All you have to do is, as a mother, is not admit that you're having abortion for these certain reasons, and it's a mute law. It's a waste of time. And lastly, Texas Abolitionist Strategy. So this is another popular pro-life organization where they thought it would be great to take on some of the abolitionist language. So apparently some of the things we're doing must be working, because now the pro-life organizations are actually using abolitionist language. I'll let you kind of evaluate how that looks optically. But when you begin to tell people you want to abolish abortion, but you're not actually seeking bills that would do that, let me lay that out. So they have Brenda, which we already covered, and I would call this more like a time capsule bill. So once you pass it, it's going to allow Brenda to go into effect, and then after a couple of years, it's going to allow the heartbeat bill to go into effect, and then after a couple more years, it's going to abolish abortion, or not. Because it's not going to offer equal protection. We were just at the Capitol Monday, and here's the deal: if there's not equal protection under the law, then implicitly there's not equal value. So I was saying earlier, if a mother kills a 1-year-old, most of us would say she might need seek mental help, and that's a protection under the current law. Or she might really just be not a great person, and there needs to be some penalty for her. Each case will need to be judged based on existing penal code laws. But the point is that when it comes time to inside the womb, the same penalty should be applied. When they're talking about banning abortion, they're literally just talking about people assisting a woman in taking the life of their child. See, the pro-life community treats the mother as a victim, right? And that's sacred to them. They would never hold the mother accountable. And I want to share something real quick on that. When we don't call good good and evil evil, when we're not honest with people, I mean, for all of us who love the Lord, right? We are to acknowledge our sin. We have to agree with God about what He says sin is. And we can't start by telling our daughters or wives or girlfriends that's sin. We're removing opportunities for redemption. They need to know that they killed a child. And you know what else? All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. All have gone astray. And it's in light of that reality that they can be redeemed, that the blood of Christ can be applied. When we lie to women and we tell them they're a victim, when they're the perpetrator, you know, guys will come up and ask, they'll be like, hey, what about the case of rape and incest? I'm like, well, you killed the husband, you killed the dad, right? And they're like, oh, well, no, I wouldn't kill the dad. I mean, that would be terrible. But it's like, no, you don't punish the child for the sins of the father. In the same way, when a mother is trying to, you know, being treated as a victim, when in reality, I get it. Like I said, the law is a tutor. We've been teaching women the law has been teaching women that preborn children are clumps of cells for the last 48 years in this country. The way we undo that is by establishing a law that is consistent with God's word, that is consistent with the idea that life begins at conception. And this right here, where they are hijacking the language that we're using, you study it. You go and look it up. They do not want to outlaw abortion. They want to ban the assistance that women have to abort their children. So honestly, what this does is it actually promotes do-it-yourself abortions. Because a mother will never, I can pull up testimony from Monday where the legislative director for an organization, that's a pro-life organization, said it is their opinion that women should not be criminalized or held accountable, I would say. One of the biggest challenges, or one of the biggest allegations of abolitionists is that we just want to bring bills that are going to criminalize women, that are going to give women the death penalty. And I'm saying, no, that's not what I'm trying to do. Like, I'm trying to bring a bill that will actually defend and protect 55,000 preborn children in the state of Texas from anyone that wants to kill them before they're born. Yeah, my friend John Speed in the back here comes from New York, and I'm thinking, 2015, there were more black babies aborted than born. It's like it's more dangerous to be in the womb than it is to be born. You know, it's insane. So let me wrap this up. What can you do? I'm gonna kind of fly through this because I'm beyond my time. Recruit, go, give. So recruit, get your friends, neighbors, church involved, use social media, help list build, go, get involved you don't have to get involved in the Republican Party. I'm making a case where that's a structure that you can get involved in if you want to get involved in the Democratic Party. One thing I'll say about getting involved in that is it's hard to get people out of seats. People that are already going to these party structures, they're already activists. They're already engaged. If you can convert them and influence them and call out their presuppositions and say, hey, but you say you believe life begins at conception. Hey, you say you believe that children deserve protection. Then you can win them over. And all of a sudden now you have an influencer on your team that already has a network of other people. So there's some more reasons around why getting engaged in the party is a way to influence more people. Become a precinct chair, attend executive committee meetings at your county and senatorial district levels, serve on committees, attend conventions, influence what it means to be a Republican, lobby your legislator. So we're going to do that tomorrow. We're going to go in Austin and get to see where these people in the seat of power get to legislate. How to lobby, what to bring. Schedule an appointment with representative or their chief of staff or legislative director. Copy the bill. Take a copy of the bill on a one-pager ask if your legislator will co-author the bill and what bills he is working on for your district. So let me slow down a little bit. So this is what you want to do if you're able to visit with your legislator. You want to talk to them or their chief of staff. You want to take a copy of the bill. So for us right now, it's HB 3326. You want to take a copy of that, say, I would like you to co-author this bill, and you're going to take a one-pager, which we have in the back, which basically tells you about the bill and kind of some of the arguments that support that bill. Attend hearings, testify. We did this Monday. There were 10 pro-life bills brought before the Senate. There was a hearing, went until 12:30 at night, and we showed up with probably 50, 60.
West said 75.
Okay, even 75. I don't know. A lot of people. We were there until 12:30. 2-minute testimonies. And probably, definitely, at least half the testimony was abolitionists. So we showed up and made sent a message to them that we're against pro-life bills for the reasons I just mentioned. Thank your legislator when they do good. Thank them through email, thank them publicly, and then also let everyone know when they do bad, when they don't support your bills. Give. So I mentioned a little bit about ATX, I'm not going to dwell on this, but our mission at ATX is to abolish abortion in Texas by mobilizing Christians to influence civil government in obedience to the Great Commission. The foundation, it's a 501c4, we also have a C3. All that's just to say that we're a small organization of Christian fathers with families by the grace of God. Let's see. Abolitionists, we could not advance the work we have done so far without the righteous cause and a group of dedicated supporters. So it's an honor to serve and advocate on behalf of the 80,000 people that sign our petitions. And that's what it is. As an organization, we get to go in and say we have the backing of these people. So we want to continue to increase that number and continue to advocate and notify people when they can go to hearings, when they can show up, bring bills. I'm just going to skip through this. Realize about that. ATX resources, check out our website, sign our petition. You can sign our petition on the website or you can sign up in the back. And check out our YouTube. There's a lot of educational resources. Russell, definitely, Free the States has a lot of great resources as well. Sign up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram to follow and see some of the things we're doing. And then, lastly, I kind of mentioned this at the beginning. Really what we're doing here is just the Great Commission, right? I'm not saying that the gospel supersedes this and has even further implication, but we are to love our neighbor, and we need to advocate for justice in the land. And the Great Commission, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey all that I've commanded. The law is a tutor. And we don't show up to advocate for biblical law, and we allow man's reason, right, subjective reason to come up with laws. We kind of miss the mark, by pretty far. So as Christians, we need to show up and advocate for a biblical position so that we begin to value life. And lastly, on the 30th, we have a rally at the Capitol. I hope you guys are able to join us. This is an opportunity. It has two goals. One is to just show a good presence. We're going to be literally right outside of the House of the Texas legislature, and they're going to be able to see us rallying before them. So if we show up with 50, what does that say? If we show up with 100, 200, 500, we need all hands on deck. And we need you to bring your neighbor and your friend and your coworker. So know that. There's more information in pamphlets about that. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Daryl. Thanks.
All righty.